Welcome back to the Rethink Our Live. I'm Dr. Libby Sander, and on the show, I talk to guests who give us an insight into what the future of work looks like and how we can reimagine our work and lives. If you have ever felt stuck in your career or overwhelmed by the thought of change, or just not sure what to do next, you are going to love today's guest. Priyal Sodha chats to me about how she completely reinvented her career, going from 16-hour days, working in a multinational consulting firm, being told by her doctor that she was suffering from severe burnout, and watching her manager have a heart attack in the middle of a client meeting. It's so easy for us to stay stuck on the path we're on, or to feel overwhelmed by the thought of change, or just not know where to start. I love talking with Priyal, and I know you are going to love hearing how she made these shifts and how 6 years ago she started traveling and living the remote work life that many Priyal, thank you so much for being here. I know you're in Argentina today, and I've been following all these beautiful spaces and places that you've been, following and going to on your stories on Instagram. So I know people are going to love to hear about your adventures and the things that you've been doing. And I've been following your story for a little while now. So I'm super excited to talk to you today about the way you've completely reimagined your work and life, years before we all started talking about it, post-COVID and this big shift to, work from home or work from remote places. And so, yeah, you've been living this. And so, I know people are saying, I don't want to commute anymore. And why am I going to an office every day? And 6 years ago, you already had this thought, and you've gone out and created, this incredible story about how you did totally reinvent and rethink your life. So I know everyone is going to love hearing that today. So, welcome to the Rethink Project. It's fantastic to have you here, and really looking forward to chatting with you. So, I think one thing that's really changed, and we're seeing this in the research, is that we know people are really wanting to keep this idea of hybrid or, having more flexibility in their life. But another thing is that people's definitions of work and success have really changed since the pandemic. It used to be, you would go to school, study really hard, go to university, work really hard and try and get the right job. And you'd sort of be on this trajectory of, how quickly you can climb the corporate ladder. So is that how it started for you, growing up with this idea of, high achieving, studying hard and getting a great job?
Yeah, exactly. Like textbook definition of what success meant. It was literally like, I think the path was paved. I was just like on that, and there was no other way of looking at it. It wasn't even like an option. It was just like, for some reason, it wasn't actually like that somebody had put like a lot of pressure on me to have it done this way. It was just, I felt like I needed to be successful, and the only definition of success, like you're saying, was go out there, get straight A's in school, go to university, complete that, get the first like high paying job straight out, go and work for like multinationals. And that, was the definition of success. And I think it was, in a way, it was good that I tried to do it that way, because it's the only way that I knew for sure that that was not what success felt like to me. Because like when you actually go and achieve everything that you think is going to lead to success, and it doesn't give you that sense of fulfillment and sense of achievement that you thought it would, that's the only time you realize, oh, actually, yeah, this is not really what I was expecting or looking for in life.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, as you said, because if you haven't tried that, you really don't know. So you grew up in South Africa, and then so you went to college. And tell us a little bit about your first early jobs and sort of the early part of your career.
So yeah, I born and raised in South Africa, and then I went into university without an idea of what it was that I wanted to do, actually. And I remember my dad actually took me to a career counselor. And it was like, even the discussion that we had with the career counselor, he was just like, so do you like sitting, like, do you like being behind a desk and having like a desk job? And I was just like, nope, you. Like, that sounds disgusting. And then he was like, oh, okay. And do you think you creative? And I was like, well, I mean, I don't know. Like, all I've been doing is going to school. Like, I haven't really tried my hand at a lot of things. And he was like, you seem like you're creative. You should try marketing. And like, that was the discussion. It wasn't like, really trying to get to know me or talking about like what the options were. It was like, in his mind, it was either accounting because that was a desk job, or marketing because, hey, that's so much more creative. But the funny thing is that it turned into a desk job anyway. Like, even the marketing, it wasn't nearly as creative as I thought it would be. I didn't even realize in the beginning that marketing, you needed to work at an agency for it to be creative. Like, when you're doing marketing at a head office, you just executing strategy, you're not coming up with any of the creative stuff. So it was a real learning curve in the beginning. I was lucky enough to get a job at Mercedes-Benz straight out. So again, like, definition of success, I'm like, this is going to be like
For
perfect.
sure.
It's
Yeah.
once, it's a multinational, like prestigious, whatever. And it was good. Like, I learned a tremendous amount from the people there. But it took like 1 month for me to realize, like, oh, this is not the marketing I was expecting it to be. We were just like implementing the strategy from Germany and doing nothing creative, sitting in meetings with the creatives, wishing that I was on the other side of the table. And yeah, like, it starts setting in really quickly that this is not how you imagine it to be. But I started in a graduate program, so I started with like another 10 graduates straight out, like from different areas. And we all used to go to lunch together, and it was just like this discussion about how unhappy everybody was and how disenchanted we all were. But everyone just like started slipping into like, okay, I guess this is normal, this is how it is, we're just going to have to accept it and make do. And that was sad right from the beginning.
It is really sad. As you said, early in your career, graduate positions, and everyone's in with a very prestigious company, Mercedes-Benz, and you're thinking, okay, I've made it, I'm on the trajectory now. I've made it to this first rung. And then I think for a lot of people, it's this real cognitive dissonance, with our brain and our emotions and our heart. And you get into the job and you think, exactly as you said, this is not that great. I don't feel that happy. But on the other hand, this is what I'm meant to do, and I should be grateful to have this, opportunity. So what did you do then? Did you stay there for a little while, or what was the next step?
So I actually like would have stayed, but we went through I think it was at the time where like people were just what was it called? My brain's just like, I've
The
lost the
GFC,
word.
the GFC, when
Yeah.
there's a lot of layoffs, right? Yeah.
So it was exactly at that point, and the CEOs of the company said, you know what, listen, we've just recruited you guys and we're not going to let you go, but we're not going to be able to give you guys like permanent positions immediately. It's still going to be like an extended graduate program. And that was the first time like I got itchy feet, and I was like, no, I have this whole plan for me. Like, at 25 I need to be like this manager, and like, you have like this whole plan laid out. And I was like, one more extra year, like I can't wait that long. So I actually like jumped ship while everybody else stayed. And in a sense, like, I'm glad that I did it, because it continued giving me more experiences and allowed me to maybe leave in the end a lot sooner. But unfortunately, I actually jumped ship into like a worse situation.
Wow.
So yeah, I got accepted by this company that like promised the world, and they were just like, okay, so you're really young at the moment. So I was 21 or 22 at the time. And they were like, you're really young at the moment, but we'll put you into like this really administrative role.
Mhm.
And then from there, we'll just like, start giving you the promotions that you need, and then we'll give you all these creative projects to work on and stuff. And the first 6 months went by and it was just admin, like pure admin. I was just like filling out
Yeah.
invoices and doing paperwork, and like my soul was literally just draining out of my body. There's no other way of explaining it. I was they came a point and I was like mortified to believe that that
Mm.
was who I was. But like
Yeah.
there came a point where I would just literally like go and take bathroom breaks to get away from my desk. Like
Wow.
it got that bad. And I'm not that kind of person at all. Like I'm really
Mm.
passionate and I love what I do, but literally I was taking bathroom breaks to escape from the job that I
Yeah.
had. And finally, like I had to have a discussion with my manager and say, like, if we're not going to move me into an actual marketing position out of this admin, then it's just not going to work. And that's when it feels like it was like a different world, because at that point he was like, you know how it is, like, we can't promote somebody that's 21. You're gonna have to wait till you're like 25 or 26 or
Wow.
something. And it was just such a normal discussion.
Do
It was
admin for the
like,
next 4 years and then we might
yeah.
promote you. Yeah.
And like that's the reality of what work was like a few years ago. It was like,
Mm.
that you have to work yourself through these
Mm.
positions, and then you can, like, once you've proved yourself. But it doesn't make sense, because I'm terrible at admin, but that's because like my job is not actually like, I was never
You didn't
administratively
want to
inclined.
do admin. Yeah.
Don't want to do that. Why should I be good at something that I don't want to do?
Yeah.
And yet, like, a lot of companies work that way. Like, you have to start
Mm.
at the bottom and then work your way up. And like, some people are made to be managers and they're not going to be really good at like admin. In the opposite way as well. Like, some people are meant to be specialists,
Yes.
and yet, like, you think like, oh, because he's a really good specialist, they're going to make like really good managers. And it's like, no, that's really not how it works. It's just this old way of thinking, like this methodology that we've adopted because
Yeah.
everyone's been doing it in the past.
Yeah, and this mindset I think is so important. As you said, we've stuck in this mindset, and a lot of the problems we're seeing with the transition now to hybrid work or remote work is that a lot of managers have only ever managed one way. And so, in some ways it's not their fault. They really don't know how to do something different, and a lot of the way we do work is just the way we've always done it. And so we think, well, that must work, it must be okay. We're just going to keep doing it. But the reality is we know it doesn't work, that, less than a third of employees globally are engaged in their job. Productivity has been declining for decades. We've had technology to change things for decades, but we've kind of stayed stuck in this mindset. So, what your manager was saying is I see that everywhere. It's really indicative of kind of how we got stuck, pre-COVID. So what are you're feeling, you don't even want to get out of bed in the morning to go and do this job. So what did you do then?
So yeah, I think when he had the discussion, he was like, okay, so 4 years and then we'll get there. And it seemed so reasonable. I was just like, I'm handing in my resignation today. It wasn't even like, let me think of a plan and then come back to you. And it was just so intense for me to have to hear that and think that this next 6 months is going to be, the last 6 months is going to be in my next 4 years.
Yeah.
That I was just like, I'm handing it in today. Like, I'm not going to even come back tomorrow and discuss this. And yeah, I left. It was ridiculous, because the moment that I left, like, I thought that it would like be panic and I would just be sitting there like, oh my God, what am I going to do? How is this going to work? Like, I didn't have the next job lined up. But I actually like drove out of the offices and went for a movie in the middle of the day. And I was like, wow, this is what freedom feels like. And it was such a relief. Like, honestly, more than panic, I just felt this enormous sense of relief. And then, yeah, I went on to like freelance for about a year afterwards, where I was like working for myself and trying to just wing it. And that's actually when I realized that my natural tendency was towards consulting more than marketing.
Right.
Yeah. So did that for a year and then went back into actual consulting.
Yeah.
with a
So you were in a
consulting firm.
multinational consulting firm, and I imagine that was a whole experience in itself, in terms of, a really great representation of just the way we have worked for so long, like really long days, sort of no life outside of work. Is that what it was like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we used to do this thing where we'd like leave on a Monday or a Sunday, and stay in hotels wherever the client was. So we were basically the property of this company because we didn't have like families or lives in the evening. We were at these hotels, and basically the meetings would continue at the hotel. So like our team meetings and group meetings would happen before our day would even begin, and after our day had like well ended. But what was interesting for me is that I got to see like our own internal culture from like the consultancy point of view, but also like rotating through different companies every 6 months. I got to see a lot of different companies, which was eye opening because a lot of the time you think like, okay, this is just happening in my company, or this is
Mm,
just the culture of my company. If I move to another company, maybe it could be different.
mm,
But for us it was really just eye opening to see like, okay, this is not just my company, this is something that is happening in so many different companies. And the thing is that as a consultant we were really getting to see like trends of what was happening across the board in all different companies, like how managers were just so ill equipped to manage, not because they were bad managers or that
right.
they like just couldn't be better. It was that they were trained to be specialists the whole time and then suddenly promoted because they were good at that specialist role.
Yeah.
And they would just copy and paste a technique that in the way that they had been managed before.
Right.
um, and it just created this culture of people coming to work every day without like an actual passion or drive, and just coming to work because this is what people do, this is how you make a living. And
Yeah.
I'm waiting for my paycheck, I'm waiting for my
Mm,
retirement. And
mm.
it
Yeah,
was it was
my one
really
week of
sad.
holiday a year or my 2 weeks of holiday a year. And it's a really,
Yeah,
I see so many people that living that way. It's just like this life of sort of quiet desperation. But a lot of people think, well, I should be grateful. I've got this good job. I'm in this prestigious company. That's sort of the best you can hope for, really. And so you were seeing that with a lot of not just the company you worked with, but also all of these other companies as well.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you have these consulting projects, you have this opportunity to really reimagine how things could be. But I think one of the things that we also learned was that it's so much easier to think of and strategize, but so much harder to actually implement. Like the change process is, it's not that the change is hard to implement, it's our mindsets that are the hardest to get over that bridge. Like, okay, but we're doing it in such a completely different way. Like, whoa, no, that's way too scary.
Yeah.
And like a funny example is that while we were in a lot of these companies, we were already telling them like, you could automate so much of what you're doing right now,
Mm-hmm.
and allow your team to work remotely, or allow them to have days off or
Mm.
days where they're just not coming into the office. And that entire principle and mindset was just like, no, that's like something that might happen like 20 years from now. Like, it's
Wow.
not for right now, that's not going to happen in any time like now. And they kept blaming systems. They were just like, it's our IT systems will not be able to manage that, and we just don't have the most up-to-date systems. And then all of a sudden this pandemic happens, and in
Mm.
months or weeks we've got
Yeah.
IT systems all like living up to it. We've got Zoom that's come out for the whole world to use, and
Yes.
we just adapted so quickly when the need
Yes.
arrived. But when there wasn't this push, we were just like,
Yeah.
maybe like in the next 10 years, we'll see
Yes.
about it then.
It's a bit like the admin job, isn't it? Like in 6 months' time. But that's such a good point. We kept having a lot of these excuses about why we can't change. But if you're not in the office, I can't see you. And what if you're just lying around watching Netflix all day, or going to the gym or watching a movie or something like that? And yeah, it was literally in many countries around the world overnight. I know certainly, in Australia, it was like, okay, the next day we're at home. and we just had to adapt. And as you said, when there is a clear purpose and everyone is focused on that, well, there is no other choice. We can't use the excuse that we have to go through, 5,000 meetings and come up with 600 Gantt charts and then figure out what's the first step. It's like, no, we have to be at this outcome tomorrow. And everyone just figure that out. And we did, pretty much of course, there were a few hiccups, but companies around the world overnight, it just happened. And, things didn't stop. Media companies were producing the news from their lounge room. We had printing companies printing from home, companies that they never thought that they could do this. So yeah, it's really that focus, and just our human resistance to change, as you said, is really significant. It says, okay, well, maybe I'm not that happy with the way things are now, but I'm uncomfortable with change. Like, I'm afraid maybe, what it could be like. Maybe I can't control that. So you were working pretty much round the clock, except when you were asleep?
Yeah, so we were doing 16-hour days easily.
Wow.
And at the time, I think because I came from that administrative position that was just not challenging at all, I was just so grateful for the challenge. I was like, I'll give any time that you want, because it really was a challenge. It was like, doing your MBA overnight all of a sudden. It was like, the experience was great, but it at no point in my mind was it like, okay, I can have this experience, but also have the balance of being able to, live a normal, healthy life. And I think that's where it was sad, is that like, okay, I probably found a job that I really did love, but it was impossible to continue, past a certain point, because it's just not, it didn't have the balance that the healthy life balance. It was my whole life was just work, 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 and there was nothing else to it. I'd come home at the end of the week on a Friday, and my friends would be like, "We haven't seen you all week. Let's go out." And I'd just be like, "Okay, let's try and do this." But I'd be falling off to sleep at the table, or my mind would still be thinking about work and how I was going to solve that specific problem, or come up with a new strategy or whatever, while I was still sitting with my friends. And it was just ridiculous. It felt like this was all that there was to life. It didn't even occur to me at a point that there was anything else. It was like, this is it. Like, this is life.
Yeah. You kind of hear this. And did you notice that was taking sort of a toll on how you felt physically or emotionally, or did you notice the effect of people around you? Or did they were they just numbed out at that point to go, yeah, I'm always tired, I'm always stressed, I've always got headaches, that's just how life is?
So yeah, it took a while for me to accept it. Like, I think I just turned a blind eye for quite some time. But there came a point when I was on a project where I had this feeling where if I was in a meeting and I was presenting, I was all charged up and all systems go. But the minute the meeting would end and I'd be sitting at my desk, I would feel like a narcoleptic. I would just be able to fall off to sleep in a second. Like, I would want to crawl under the table and just sleep. And I was like, this is not normal. It wasn't from a case of like being bored or being lazy or anything. It was like, I just didn't have the energy to stay up. And I went to a doctor at that point, and I don't go to a doctor. Like, it needs to be like near death for me to go. But this was just getting so bad that I was like, okay, I need to go and check this out. So I went to the doctor and I was like, what is going on? Like, something's so strange. And she started running so many tests, and she was like, okay, the one thing that's definite from your blood is that your adrenals are shot completely. Like, you are pumping adrenaline through your body like as if there's a lion constantly chasing you. And I was like, whoa, aren't you being like a little bit dramatic? And she was like, no, I'm not being dramatic. Like, this is actually what's going on. And she was like, well, that's the thing, is that while you are under pressure, your adrenaline is using so much of your energy that by the time you've like left the meeting and you're allowed to just like decompress even slightly, you've got no energy left at all. And I was just, that's a little bit scary.
This can't be good.
Also, like, my oh, it doesn't sound so great. And then the other thing was that I just didn't have time to like pack a healthy lunch or have lunch even sometimes. So I was doing this thing where I would like have energy drinks as my lunch.
Wow.
And it just seemed
Wow.
so normal. Like, it didn't even occur to me. But when she asked me
Yeah.
the question, she was like, so what have you been having for lunch this week? I was like, actually, I haven't really been having lunch, but there's this canteen that sells this giant energy drink, and I've just been going and getting that. And she was like, do you have any idea how bad this is for your system? And but I think the real shock came was like I was dissociating as
Mm,
well.
mm,
um
mm,
there'd be like moments where I'd look into the mirror and I'd be like, who is this person? Not because, like, I was just so dissociated. Like, there were more times where I'd drive the same road that I had been driving every day for the past month, like, no, 4 or 5 months.
mhm.
And I would like wake up, like, I'd be awake, but it's like there would be a moment of clarity when I'd look at the road and I'm like, where am I? It feels like I've never seen this road before.
Wow.
And when I explained that to her, she was like, maybe you have temporal lobe epilepsy and like this whole list of things. But it's
Oh my
only
God.
now when I'm like, it wasn't any of that. It's now when I'm looking back at my life, I was just like, I was so not present in life that there were moments where I was just like blind driving out of just like memory. And I was like, okay, I need to get to the office. But my mind was so focused on like this client and that thing, that project, and all of these things that were going on, that I wasn't focusing on what the road even looked like or what my face even looked like in the morning. Like, I'd wake up and I don't think I actually was looking at my face. I was like
Wow.
looking in the mirror, thinking about something else. And all of these little things, I was just like trying to bury and trying to just ignore that they were happening. But they just kept getting louder with time. And I was like, oh God, this is probably a little bit of a problem. I mean,
Yeah.
now looking at it, it was a huge problem. But at that point in time, like, oh, it's a mild problem, something to sort out.
But you're right. You've normalized to the fact that you're having energy drinks for lunch. You're in your early 20s and you're having these physical symptoms. And I remember working with lawyers in big law firms, and one of them saying to me, "Yeah, I'm so jittery all the time, and I'm so stressed." And we were just chatting about his work hours and his lifestyle, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I normally have 10 to 14 cups of coffee a day, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's probably like extremely unhealthy. And, I worked with a number of law firm partners, one who was in his mid 40s and he had a complete breakdown physically, and he actually just had to retire from the law, and he could never come back to work. And it was just this kind of carnage of a treadmill of working 80 100-hour weeks. And in one firm we had a public holiday, and I remember the next day talking to the managing partner, and he said, I was so happy yesterday because I came to the office at 5 o'clock and most of the lights were on, and so many people were at work. And I was like, wow, this
Wow.
is where it comes from, this idea from the top and these cultures that this is the only way that we can work, and that we have people in their 40s having complete breakdowns, never coming back to work. In Japan, they have this phenomenon called karoshi, where people work so much they just drop dead at their desk, and it's a huge issue for them because they have this culture of overworking and FaceTime and being present, and that's what you're expected to do, to the point where it's actually killing people. So whilst there have been so many things about COVID that have been obviously not what we would ever have chosen, I think the huge pattern interrupt to work has been this massive opportunity to sort of change. So you've been at the doctor, she's telling you these things, and you're like, oh my goodness, what is happening to my life? What did you kind of go home straight away and think, well, I need to, were you in denial a bit, or what happened next?
I went back to the office and imagined that the entire conversation didn't happen. I was supposed to go for like a follow-up to that specific appointment, and I just never went because it was just too much to deal with. Like, it was begging for a life change, and I was just not at that point in my life ready for it. And I think that's where like my compassion comes from, in understanding when people say like, it's so hard to make that change. It's not
Yeah.
something that, even when you are getting these really big wake up calls and
Mhm.
there's like your life is begging for these changes to be made, it is hard. And a lot of people look at the changes that I made now and they're like, you're so brave and I could never do that. And I'm like, I was there. I'm not, it's not that I'm like some exemplary example or something. Like I was in your shoes. I struggled to make that change myself. Like it was daunting and it was scary, and it was easier to just bury my head in the sand and just act like it never happened.
Yeah.
But I can definitely say from like being on the other side now that it is so worth it. Like it's scary and it's really challenging, and it just seems like impossible from like where you're standing at that point in time. But it just literally takes like a leap of faith, and it's like 1 second of your mind just like not trying to keep you in the safe mode, and that's all it takes, is you making that decision in that split second and you out.
Yeah.
You just
So that kind of happened for you. Did you go to your manager and say, look, I'm kind of having all these feelings, or this is what my doctor just said, or I'm wanting to, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do, or how did it sort of happen?
So I think after that, there were many little things that continued happening. And some of them were wake-up calls, but some of them were like some of it came from a place of desire. So the wake-up calls were like my director, who is my mentor and I love him to death. He actually had a heart attack on the job. Like we watched him having a heart attack and being rushed to the hospital. And it was part of business goes on kind of thing, but all of the rest of us had to just go into the next meeting. Like all of this was happening and we just had to go into the next meeting, and that like twisted my stomach so badly. And then he came back with an entire pharmacy of pills and continued working, and I was just like, this is not right. Like what, this doesn't make any sense. So there was that. And then like I think a year later I lost my dad, and that also was just like such a wake-up call, because he had a very similar philosophy where he was like, I'm going to work extremely hard until I turn 50, and then it's going to be, my retirement's going to kick in and I'm never going to look back. It's just going to be like permanent vacation from there, because I would have worked that hard. And to see that that's not how it plays out, and that there is possibilities where you think you have everything planned and it's all working out, and then life just happens, was obviously a big wake-up call. But I think the year after that I still continued, because I think at that point I was still in just like robot mode. I was like trying to just continue some semblance of life. But a year after, it was my birthday, and I think this was the point where it came from desire. So it was my birthday, and it was like a Monday night, and I was sitting with like I was on a very small project. So it was I was project managing 2 people, and they were like, it's Monday, but it's your birthday. Like, you can't just act like it's a normal day. And I was like, well, we have work tomorrow. What do you mean? And they were like, no, let's just, because we were all staying at hotels, right? So it's not like you can be with your family or your friends or whatever. So they were like, no, we're going to get this like bottle of alcohol and we're just going to party. And even if we go hungover to work tomorrow, you're the project manager, so it's okay. And I was like, oh, okay. So we ended up getting like completely wasted. And at some point in this whole like crazy night, I pulled out this Pinterest board that I had created, and I started like showing them this board that it was like of all these places in the world that I wanted to see, because for as long as I could remember, that was like my biggest dream. It was like, oh, I guess like I have to work for it. And then one day, when the work wasn't my dream, it was just a means to an end. And I was like showing them all of these places, and then at some point in that conversation I was like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I actually doing here? Like, there's so many places to see. Like, why am I still here? Like, what is this? And when that project came to an end, I actually went to my director and I had this conversation with him where I thought that he would just tell me like, have you lost your mind? Or like, you need to, like, what's going on? But actually, so I spoke to him and I was like, I feel like I've learned the most of what I really needed to learn here. And every project that I go into next, I'm just going to learn maybe 5% more than I did before. It's not like an 80% learning curve anymore.
Mm.
And there's just, I'm not enjoying it as much. It's not as challenging as it used to be. And, I really want to go and see the world. And as the words came out of my mouth, I was just like, you did not say that. And he was like, what do you want to do? And it was at that point where I was like, I don't even have, I can't tell him that I want to go and, learn how to play the piano, or I want to go and do, I don't know, do a culinary course in this country. It was like completely vague in my mind. I was like, I don't know, but I know that it's not this anymore.
Right.
And he was just like, I sounded completely insane, and yet he looked at me and he was like, go. And I was like, what?
What?
And that's when he like really opened up to me, and he was like, so he's been in the company for, by now it's probably 30 years, but at that point it was like 25. And he was like, I had this thought pass through my mind so many times at different points while I was at this job, but I kept postponing it, thinking, well, next year, or, after this project ends, or after I've made the next milestone, like after the next promotion, after the next salary increase, after buy my
Mm.
house. And he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I am 30 years later with a heart attack, with a pharmacy full of tablets, and I haven't left. So yeah, like he's had real wake-up calls, and he was still there. And in a way it felt like he was just like trying to kick me out of the nest, like, while you can, just go, please
Go.
go. And I think like it was just such a shock to my system that he was actually understanding of this, and that it
Yeah.
wasn't this insane dream that I had. Like, I really thought the discussion was going to be like, Priyal, you have a promotion coming up, your path has just begun and you have so much ahead of you. What are you thinking? And actually it was the opposite.
Yeah.
So
How
like, yeah, I think
fantastic though. That's wonderful.
it was incredible. I'm so grateful for that discussion with him. And I think it was after that I was just like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. So
Right.
plan or no plan, I'm just going. And I handed in my resignation with no plan. I didn't know what or where or how after that. And it took a month for me, like just actually sitting at home. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I'd like wake up and be like, where am I going? What am I doing? I'm not sure, but like excited for the first time, because I was like, okay, at least I'm not doing what I don't want to do. I'll
Right.
figure it out. And
Yeah.
then a month later, like not even a month later, a few weeks later, um, again, it came from like a place of desire. I was like going through, I guess it was Pinterest or something, looking at all these places in the world. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to book it, because I've been dreaming about traveling my whole life. And I'm just going to book a ticket. And I don't know what's the worst thing that could happen. And I think that was the motto from then on, is literally, what is the worst that could happen? Because
Mm.
when you really think about it, there's not that much that could go wrong. Like, there's always a way through it. There's always a way
Yeah.
out. There's always a way to go back. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to do this. And yeah, never
Yeah.
look back.
So you jumped on a plane. Where was the first place that you went?
So I jumped on a plane to Thailand, and it was because I found out that there was the ceremony happening that I had a picture saved of. And it was like this lantern ceremony where they released lanterns into the sky. And it was like this, it was one of those pictures that are on people's bucket list that you feel like, yeah, it's never going to happen, but I'm going to save it because one day maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I have this chance, like if nothing else, I'd at least have seen this lantern festival. I'm definitely just going. So I went and booked this ticket and ended up in the city where the lantern festival was actually taking place. And I found out that like you had to book the tickets months in advance, so I couldn't actually go.
Oh no.
But they had the festival like happening throughout the entire town, but they had like, the official ceremony happening at the stadium. But I was just like so excited to have like made it to this town and
Yeah.
be able to like see the world in such a different view. Because yeah, like once I got to Thailand, it was like life was completely different. There were people at the hotel that I was staying at. The staff that used to work at the hotel used to practice Muay Thai tonight, like every evening together.
Right.
And the one actually a champion in Muay Thai, and they would their lives were just so different. They would sit on the balcony in the middle of the afternoon and be playing songs, and it was just this relaxed environment where there wasn't a rush to go and do things, or this need to prove yourself, or this need to feel like I've
Yeah.
had a productive day, or
Yes.
earned my worth today. It was
Yes.
just this pure enjoyment of life. And I was it felt like I'd landed on a different planet or something. I was just like,
What's
wow, like,
happened?
oh, is this life? Like, people actually live like this? You can actually,
Yeah.
and like, just the energy of it was just so calm and so peaceful. There was no competitions between people. There was nothing to prove. Everyone was just really just enjoying themselves. It was like
Such a
mind
shock.
blowing.
So
Yeah.
people don't do this. I'm living and working in hotels. I go to bed, I go out with my friends, and you're still thinking about work. Then you land in this, as you said, it felt like a foreign planet. So did it take your nervous system and your brain kind of a while to adjust and sort of kind of decompress from this life you've been living? Like, what was that like?
I think it might have taken years, if I'm being completely
Wow.
honest. In the beginning, like I think I acclimatize quite quickly. But so in the beginning, in my mind, I was like, okay, I've acclimatized, and I'm just enjoying this life of traveling. And but now that I look back at it, I actually used to plan itineraries and have like things to do and be like, okay, so if I've ticked off everything on my little itinerary, then I've had a productive day. Like, I could not release this notion of productivity, of this idea
Wow.
that, like, I could just do anything. I could just whatever, it was up to me. I still, even though it wasn't like work, even though it wasn't like anybody had any expectations for me, it was just me living my life. I
Yeah.
still had this like thing at the back of my head, which was like, but did you do enough today? Did you earn your worth? Have you
Yeah.
like that concept
Mm.
really took a really long time for me to let go of, and I didn't even realize that it was happening. It's only now that I'm on the other side of it that I'm like, I was really still trying to be productive. I was like treating it like it was a job, like not like it was just like traveling or something. And I would
Yeah.
always like be come up with like a new project or assigning myself a new project, which was amazing. It was really fun. But this
That need.
idea,
Yeah.
yeah, this like it's like a constant anxiety that like if I
Yeah.
haven't been productive, if I haven't proved myself or proved my worth, that
Yeah.
some strange sensor is just going to come down. What are you doing? You a bad human
You
being.
have
Like,
failed today. It's such an
yeah,
important point. And I think that was one of the big shocks for people with COVID when they started working from home, because what we've seen is a lot of people work longer hours than they were actually working in the office. And people say to me all the time, there's this guilt of like, oh, but I haven't, suddenly I can get my work done faster because I'm not being interrupted, or I don't have to commute, and I have more energy now that I'm not spending 90 minutes plus of my day commuting. But I feel this guilt because we have this notion, as you said, of like, I haven't earned the right to sit down and have lunch or go for a walk. And it's so ingrained in us, isn't it?
deeply, very, very deeply. But yeah, and I think also just the idea of not having a plan, like even though I had jumped ship and not, tried to have a plan and just like go with the wind and see how it happens, like the first at least 2 years of my travels, I was just like, I need to have a plan. I need to have some sort of idea of the things that I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. And, it's just this crazy, it's a slave mentality in the end of the day. Like, we've just been ingrained with this idea that if we're not working, then we're not worth anything. And
Yes.
that had to be ingrained in us, because I really believe that, you know, a few generations ago, we were fighting for our survival.
Mm.
We were unsafe. We were out in, like, if you go really far back,
Yeah.
we were really just out in nature, and we were probably like the weakest species there was. So yeah, we had to,
Yeah.
like, you know, we had to build a lot of safety mechanisms for ourselves. We had to like come up with a lot of strategies in order to keep ourselves safe.
Mm.
And in that mindset, I think it makes sense that we made ourselves believe that we really had to work hard in order to survive. But
Yes.
I think it's been decades since that notion is left. We've created enough
Yeah.
safety mechanisms, we've created enough defense mechanisms. I read some crazy amount that we as like globally spend in defense.
Yes.
And it's in the billions. Like if we just released that budget and allowed that to go towards like feeding people or coming up with creative ideas and solutions in the world, we would be an entirely different nation. But I think we still are so stuck in the survival mentality that
Mm.
we're forgetting that actually we're ready to thrive. We've built enough safety, we've built enough comfort for us, that we don't need to be in a survival state anymore, but our
And
minds are still ingrained in it.
absolutely. And this transition is so hard because a lot of our structures, as you said, are still kind of keeping us stuck in this place. So, you know, there are movements around the world now towards the 4-day work week. But for most people, it's still, you know, the 40-hour week, the 5-day a week, you know, 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, or, you know, 6 to 10 or whatever, you know, you are working. And you know, these, you know, you have Sunday off or you have the weekend off. And so, you know, we grow up, we're born into these kind of structures of that, this is how it is. And the messages are very clear, you know, you have to go into that system if you're going to succeed. And that's just the way it is. And if we try to, there's a lot of pushback as well, even from other people, of people who do work part-time or who wanted to work from home before COVID. Often that negatively affected their careers because other people in the office were like, you're not working as hard, or you're not really serious about your career, or you're, you know, being here because you want to have a 9-day fortnight or a 4-day week. And so I think what the pandemic has done is given us all this huge just wake up call, like it's an existential crisis for the world about work, of going, hang on a minute, what were we doing that for? And we really don't have to keep doing it that way. And where we're at now is sort of this internal struggle between, you know, some companies are saying you must come back to the office and you must come back 5 days a week and there's no other way to do it. And yet we know that people have been more productive, or at least as productive, working at home for the last, you know, 2 years. So, you know, there's this real resistance. And I think a lot of it is that we have to address these structures and break down these assumptions that we have. And I think one of them, as you indicated, is, how do I do it differently? And so a lot of people might be listening to this and thinking, well, that's great, but then I'm scared, and I would leave my job because it's not very exciting, and I don't want to be one of those people. Like, I would talk to CEOs regularly in the work I do with them, and they would say, oh, look, I'm not passionate about anything. I don't really even like what I do, but you know, the switching costs are too high now. Like, I don't know what else I would do. It's too late for me, like your director said. So people often think, well, if there was a website I could sign up to and, you know, still earn money and, you know, sail off into, you know, the distance, that would be great. But of course, it's not like that. And so how did you sort of find your way? You obviously had a lot of skills, but maybe a lot of skills that you didn't even realize that you could bring to bear as well. So how did you kind of find that path forward with freelancing and what you do now?
So I think it was just a really big game in surrendering, just having to see what would happen. But having said that, I think now it's a very different reality to what it was 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of moments where I felt quite alone. I was like, it felt like I was swimming upstream. Everyone else was going in that direction and I was going in this direction. And it just felt like, what am I doing? Whereas I think now a lot of people have started asking the same questions and realizing that they want the same goals. So a lot of people, I think all of us are kind of trying to find the same direction. And in that, we all able to come up with solutions together that, we might not have been able to do one when we were just like a few hundred of us or a few thousand of us that were out there trying to find this. And I think that makes a big difference in the structures that exist already. Like I've seen the changes from 6 years ago to just now, like 3 years ago. There's co-working spaces that are popping up, like cafes around the place. And that, like, that's the other thing I think that's exciting, is that a lot of people are finding like, okay, I started working at home, but working in an isolated environment is not for me. I really need people to be there. I need people to work around. And that's when it's like, okay, well, it doesn't have to be an office. It could be that you go to these co-working spaces and you're meeting new people, you working in environments that are so much nicer than a square cubicle.
Yes.
These co-working spaces are incredible. They really cute coffee shops, and they have like spaces where you can take breaks and you can take your meetings. And so I think that there's a lot more opportunities right now, just for people that are
Yeah.
trying it. It is definitely a lot easier than it was a few years ago. But from my side, I think it was the desire to make this work was so strong that it
Mm.
didn't matter that it was scary. I think, like, for me, that's really important, is that it is scary. It change how, like, it's not going to get any less scary, but there comes a point where the desire for something outweighs the fear.
Mm.
And that it always finds a way. So for me, actually, like, I started traveling thinking that it would be like a 6 month sabbatical. So I had, enough savings to go for what I thought would be like a 6 month period.
Yeah.
And my first takeaway from all of this was that it didn't last me 6 months. It lasted me easily like 2 years or something.
Wow.
And I think that's something that people need to understand, is that we think we need a lot more than we actually do. And it's because we've all just been living this copy paste lifestyle. We were like, okay, we need a mortgage, we need a car, we need this fancy house, we need that, giant braai stand to go, I mean, barbecue stand to go,
Yeah.
like, entertain our friends. And then on top of that, we would like to have the things we desire. Whereas what I found was that I actually can go back down to like absolutely nothing and then start with like, okay, what is it that I actually desire? And, for me, as an example, like right now, I love visiting these really beautiful restaurants where, the chefs are just being like crazy creative with all of their ingredients and the recipes that they're coming up with. So now, yeah, I don't have a kitchen. I don't have a house. I don't have my own microwave or my own oven or my dishwasher or anything. Um, but everything that I'm saving in that, I can go and literally splurge on a daily basis
Mm.
to, like, these crazy expensive restaurants. But in our old um, lifestyles, we've got, our homes and our mortgages and all of these equipment, like
Yes.
accessories that we don't actually even use half of the time.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we're going, okay, but I really would love to go and see these incredible restaurants and go and visit them. And you're like, oh yeah, maybe I'll do it like, once a month as a little treat to myself. But
Yeah.
actually, you could be doing it every day if you just reprioritize your life so that you only focusing on the things that actually have value and meaning to you.
Mm.
So more than a job and more than an income, it was, the first lesson was really just using what I do have in the most optimal way possible.
Mm.
And that went a mile. Like, it's unbelievable how far your money can go if you're just spending it in the right ways on the things that are like the most important to you.
Yeah, I
um,
love that because it's so true, isn't it? And as you said, we're spending money on things that we think we want or we think that we need. And things often just to kind of numb us out. Okay, I'm going to get that extra, streaming subscription. I'm getting, X number of, energy drinks a week and all of these things, because it's kind of making my life bearable to deal with my manager or my commute or, my relationship that I don't want to kind of face, that maybe that's not what I really thought it was going to be either. And what am I really passionate about, and how do I want to lead my life in terms of my priorities, as you said. And we often think that it's just not possible to change that. And it is, but it comes with, as you said, you've got to be prepared to kind of surrender and go, it can be uncomfortable, it can be really different, and you have these crazy, wonderful experiences, and then probably other points where you think, oh, I'm not sure what I'm doing. And I know I was following in your stories a little while back. I know you were traveling, because you travel constantly now. You kind of decide, I'm going to live here for a while and then I'm going to move on. And I know you're now in Argentina and you haven't yet decided maybe where you're going to go next, but you were, maybe it was a month or two ago, and you were somewhere and there was like no buses and you kind of got stuck. So tell us a bit about your adventures and some of the kind of most interesting moments that you've had.
I think there's so many to choose from, but I think, okay, so I'm going to start with the disclaimer. There are very easy ways of traveling that are extremely safe and that are just, a lot easier, but I tend to choose the more adventurous ways just because I'm terrible at planning. Actually, like, that's a lie. I was extremely good at planning because my job entails that, but I just don't enjoy doing it anymore. It feels more like pressure to me to have to like plan my life, and I just kind of want to go with the flow and see where life takes me. And I think that it's a luxury. So I'm just like, okay, sometimes I might have to suffer some consequences, but they're worth it for me. So I think the time that you were actually talking about, I was in Brazil and I went to this island that was supposed to be, just incredible. It was supposed to be the most beautiful place, and everybody that had been there was just like, "Priyal, you're going to absolutely love it." And I'm not sure what happened, but I went there and I hated my time there. I don't know, I was not having the time that I thought I would. And the place that I was staying at was like, it sounded incredible because it was like this tree house in the middle of the jungle. And I was just like, wow, what a cool experience that's going to be. And, it's what I've always imagined. So I went into this and I just could not sleep throughout the night. I just kept like waking up to every sound that was around me. And I was like, what is that? What is that? What's going on? And there were just so many like creatures in the jungle. And I was just like, this is not exactly what I planned it out to be. And then finally I just like woke up and I was like, okay, I'm just going to book the next place and see what happens. And I think I spent like an entire day trying to research which place to go to next. And I was just running circles around myself and I couldn't decide. So finally, when it came to like checkout time, I was like, okay, either I have to extend my booking one more day or just check out. And I was like, I'm just going to check out. So I checked out and I got onto a boat because we had to like leave the island to go to the mainland. And I was at the mainland and I needed to book a bus. And I was just standing at this bus station with no idea where I was going to next. And I was just like, maybe that one. No, maybe that one. And then I literally went onto Google and I just like started looking at, I'm a very visual person. So I just started looking at photos and I was like, which one calls my name? And I found like a destination and I was like, okay, that one. So I went to go and make the reservation and it turned out that I had to wait like 16 hours at this bus stop, which was in the middle of nowhere, like absolutely nowhere. And I was just sitting and I was like, what am I going to do with myself for 16 hours? And there was nothing. There was literally just nothing in this town. And I was like sitting alone with people like I didn't even know. There weren't a lot of people around there. And it was one of those like crazy moments where I was just like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing with life in general? It's like when you start thinking that, you just like goes down a rabbit hole into life. And I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And it turns out, like, after I took this bus, I ended up in this place that was so beautiful. It looked like, I have no words. Like the water is just this blue that you've just never ever seen before. And it looks like it's been photoshopped, but just
Wow.
like looking at it, like it's
Yeah.
just unbelievable. And I met such incredible people. Like, I think that for me is really one of the charms of traveling, or like, just going out of your normal
Mm,
routine and days,
mm.
that you meet people you just never would have
Yeah.
imagined meeting in your life. And you hear stories of things that you could just, yeah, you'd never even think of them, because we create like a paradigm, and the more people that we meet in our life that are similar to us, the more we think that this is reality, this is
Yeah.
the be all and all. And it
Yes.
takes me people from completely different walks of life to open your mind and be like, wow, okay, this could be a different reality for me, this is a different way of living or
Yeah.
going about life. And yeah, sometimes it just takes risking not knowing
Not
which bus
knowing.
you're going to take, or not knowing what you're going to do for 16 hours. But yeah, it was so
It's
worth it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly as you said. We hire so strongly nowadays in organizations to fit the culture. And so what we end up with is people might be quite diverse in some ways, but we can end up with a whole group of people that think exactly the same way because they've been
Yeah.
hired to fit this culture. And then, if you look at social media, and Spotify is great at recommending music that you like and that you
Yes.
listen to, but it's terrible at recommending things. The algorithm doesn't say, well, let's try something completely different. And so our entire existence can end up being this, similar, way of doing things. And it's human nature that we know when we hire people in companies, that you end up unconsciously biased towards hiring people who are like you, that you're going to get along with. It's, a fairly embedded kind of bias we have. And so, as you said, opening up these opportunities and meeting people that you would never normally meet and having these experiences, can completely change our perspective, because it's hard to do that in the routines and structures that we're in every day. And so for you, that's completely shifted that. So, I could just talk to you for hours. I'm sure people would love to hear more about your adventures. But I guess, a couple more questions. Like, what is sort of next? What are your plans in terms of, maybe, do you know where you're going next? But also just, is this something that you want to continue doing now? You've obviously found a way of living that is just really aligned with who you are. I see you doing ceramic making classes and painting and all of these wonderful things that I'm sure many of us watching will think, listening, I'd love to do that, but I don't have time. Who has time to do that kind of stuff? So yeah, what's next for you?
Oh, I'd love to say I don't know. I mean, I have like a lot of ideas that I've been playing with, so I can discuss that. But honestly, it's could be anything. The one thing that's been exciting for me was, with everything that's happened with all of these changes with the pandemic, it's kind of been a little bit tempting for me to want to go back to some form of consulting again. Just because I can see so many new opportunities that I had wished for, when I was in consulting. And that, as I was saying, they seemed so far-fetched and impossible at that time. But it seems so much more possible. And that's kind of exciting for me, to just be able to be like, okay, we've all caught up to this place where I wanted us to be. And now there's just so many opportunities for us to make these changes. So there's a part of me that's wondering if maybe that is a possibility. And like I was saying, I think this whole, like, it's easy for a lot of managers to just go back to the old way of doing things after we've made such progress.
Mm.
But like, even the project that you were talking about, where you're just like reinventing the environments in which people are working, it's just so exciting. It's like a really exciting new chapter that we can embark on, and I would like to play some part in that. Also, just with all of the experiences that I've had and the outlooks that I've had, it would be incredible. But
Mm.
we'll see how that goes.
For sure.
Um, Other hand, yeah, I think it's also, I've just, I think in the last 2 years maybe, started tapping into like this more creative side. It took a while because, I never did anything artistic at school or at
Mm,
university or, you know, after work. I just didn't have the time to go and sign up for an art class or a ceramics class or anything like that. And even when I did start traveling, I always wanted to do it, but I had this mindset of like, I needed to have been doing this for a long time, like, ever since I
mm,
was a child, to be good at it. Or
yes.
you know like I'd pick up a paintbrush and I'd start my first few strokes, and my mind would already be like, oh, I wonder if we could make a career out of this. I wonder if I could like sell this painting, or I wonder if
Yeah.
somebody would buy it. And it took a really long time for me to get my mindset into a place where it was like, it's not about that. It
Mm,
doesn't matter if anybody's going to buy this. It doesn't matter if you can make a career out of it or not.
mm,
And I think that moment, that realization was so strong for me that I actually needed like a remind. I almost wanted to make a tattoo out of it, but I was like, nope, maybe that's too much. But I actually changed my Instagram handle to Playful Being at that point, because I was like, I need something to remind me that life is about playing and about being creative and not just doing things for the sake of it being, productive or like monetizing it. And like I
yeah.
think that's been like my biggest learning curve, is that every time I do something, there's so many people that come and be like, oh, you're really good at it, you should monetize that. And obviously your natural instinct is like, oh yeah, I should. But it takes, sometimes it just, it takes trying things for the sake of trying them, or
Yeah.
doing things just for the sake of joy. And a lot of the time we tend to squash that before it's even fully expressed its joy or its passion. And we're just like, oh, how do I monetize this, how do I make something out of it? And I'm really trying not to do that. And the more that I
Yes.
do it without this thought in the back of my mind, the more I'm finding that I'm so much more passionate about it, and I'm so much more creative
Mm,
when that whole old mentality is not there. That I just really want to hold on to that. And I'm
yeah.
hoping that we all get to this point where we start doing these things because we enjoy them, because that's, for me, that's like the purpose of life. We've really just come to this earth to experience life, to experience everything that there is, and to just revel in that creation and enjoy it. And I think we've forgotten that. And it really, for me, is the essence of who we are.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I love that. And, most of us don't play. Like, I loved your Instagram handle. We've forgotten how to play. And we have this whole mindset that everything has to be about growth and everything has to be about making money. And I'm going to do a startup, and then I'm going to, scale it, and then I'm going to sell it. And then I'm going to go and do exactly what you're already doing now, which is traveling to wherever you feel like, exploring things that you're passionate about, that really do bring you joy. And we sort of get stuck in this cliche. You don't have to spend the next 20 or 30 years working on the ladder, or trying to build some business to sell that you don't even care about, really, in order to make money to go and do what you might really want to do. And being like your director, having a heart attack in front of clients, that if we let go of our assumptions and we do really rethink things, we can step back into this space of going, okay, it might feel uncomfortable, but we can make these changes. And now many corporates are saying, you never have to come to the office at all, or you come 4 days a year or 8 days a year. So if you want to go and live in a treehouse looking over the beach in Costa Rica, then go and do it, and really explore what you're passionate about. So I guess to kind of end, for everyone, is like, people who are listening to this or watching it and going, I want to do this, but what would be the one bit of advice that you would give people about how to kind of make that step and to make a start?
hmm, I think the first thing is ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? Because for me, that was a big thing. Even if it's like writing it down, I think there was a point where I actually used that as an exercise, and I was like, okay, what is the absolute worst that could happen? Like, if I resigned from my job, could I get another job if I've left? And the answer was yes. Like my company wanted to take me back in 6 months. They'll take me back.
Yeah.
If I completely end up bankrupt, do I have the resourcefulness to be able to go and find a job tomorrow? Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely yes. I mean, even if it's something silly, I could go and bartend for a week, or I don't know, just anything, absolutely
Yeah.
anything. There's just so many possibilities. And when you actually think about the absolute worst, it takes that fear away from you. It takes the control that it has away from you, because you're just like, actually, it's not nearly as bad as I thought it was. But if we don't think about it, it's just this giant cloud that sits over us, and we think it's so much worse than it actually is.
Yeah.
And I think once we've looked that fear dead on and we're like, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? That's when we give space to the desire element of it, because it really is a matter of the difference between fear and love. And in this case, fear and desire. And there's no space for desire when we're just constantly thinking of survival. Like, what do I do to just survive this?
Yeah.
And if we've created this mental safety net, okay, like I have covered all my bases, and if the worst case scenario happens, I'll still be okay. It gives
Mhm.
us the ability to go, okay, so what is it that we actually want to do? And as scary as it is, sometimes we might not have the answer immediately.
Yeah.
It's a pro it really is a process. I remember watching a talk by Alan Walker where he said, I think it's become a complete cliche now, but like at that point in time, I was like, what? He had this talk about what would you do if money were no object? Like if we lived in a world that was not governed by money
Mm.
and you could do absolutely anything, what is it that you would do?
Mm.
And I didn't have the answer. In the beginning, I was just like, whoa, that's too much for my brain to even process. Like, I don't
Right.
know. I really wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But I think taking that step into trying to figure it out,
Mhm.
that is just, it's so exciting and it's so nourishing to your soul that I can tell you from the side of it, it is absolutely worth everything. It's worth the worst case scenarios in your life, and it's worth just every risk you could take, because it might not make you a millionaire and it might not make you successful by the definition that you have, but it's the completeness in your soul that you feel that is just priceless. Honestly, it's completely priceless.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
yeah.
And being completely true to yourself, you're doing all of this. You're not trying to say, oh, I'm going to go and create a YouTube channel of showing beautiful restaurants and places I've been to in order to make money. You're just exploring your passions and freelancing and doing work and things that interest you. And that changes from day to day. So, the purpose of that is completely different. So look, it's so wonderful to talk to you. I'm so looking forward to following your stories to see where you end up next. And as someone who works closely within, environments and how they affect us, seeing all these beautiful restaurants and the museums and art and, natural environments is, certainly something that, I find extremely inspiring. So thank you so much, Priyal. You can follow Priyal on Playful Being on Instagram, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again someday soon. Thank you.